Good evening and welcome. Thank you so much for coming this evening. We'll try and get you in and out before any more snow falls so that you can get home safely. Really appreciate your time. I'm Cindy Estini. I'm the supervisor of the REACH program and social studies, but tonight really you probably only care that I supervise REACH. So thank you for your time. We have two real objectives for tonight. One is to let you know a little bit about Gifted and Talented in Hillsborough. That's my piece. And here with me I have Dr. Joan Ruddiman, who is going to tell you a little bit about gifted kids in general so you can understand why Hillsborough has the program and policy that we have. So hopefully you'll leave achieving those two objectives. And if not, if you have any questions after this, feel free to reach out to me. This is really all about us creating connections so that you know we at the school district are doing everything we possibly can to help your child have a phenomenal educational experience here. So just to let you know a little bit about Dr. Ruddiman, she worked with the district a couple of years ago to have a gifted certificate program that we had both gifted and talented teachers and classroom teachers go through to develop themselves professionally in the field of gifted and talented. So she was teaching that through Rutgers University. She has her doctorate from Columbia Teachers College, and she is currently the Teacher Resource Specialist, K-12 in West Windsor-Plainsboro School District. So you'll get to hear from her in a couple of minutes, but before that, I just wanted to give a quick introduction about Hillsborough's policies regarding gifted and talented education. So hopefully you leave tonight with a good understanding of the process that your child will go through in second grade. So to start off, I wanted to call everyone's attention to the district mission statement. And like I said, our goal here is really to make sure that we're servicing every single child to the best of our ability to help them achieve their greatest potential. More particularly, there's a board policy about gifted education, and it's based on New Jersey state law. So in New Jersey, it's a little different than some other states. Some other states consider gifted a classification almost like special education. That is not the case in New Jersey. The only law in New Jersey about gifted services states that we need to identify students who are gifted when compared to their peers and provide some services. There's nothing else really in the state law besides that. So if you look at the board policy that's based on that law, we do compare students to their chronological peers, and we're looking for whether your child requires modification to their program. Another note about something I hope you get out of tonight, I hope when you leave tonight you feel really good that regardless of whether or not your child participates in the REACH program, that they're going to get a lot out of their education here, and that identification in the REACH program is one of the many things that we do to service students, but it's not a be-all, end-all of your child's success in the future. So that's really a point that I'd like to hammer home, and I think from hearing from Dr. Ruddiman about some of the challenges that students who are really profoundly gifted face may help you understand why I say that. So as far as our understanding of what is gifted. What is the difference between a student who requires modification to their program through REACH or just a student who's doing really well, doing everything that we ask from them and going to have a great educational experience? If you've heard our superintendent, Dr. Schiff, speak about the idea of giftedness, he often compares the bright, shiny apple, the schoolhouse gifted, to gifted, and I'll explain with a couple characteristics. So on the left up here, I have a list of characteristics of a bright child. They're interested in school, they like to study, they do everything that their teacher asks them to do. On this side, however, there's another list. So the left side is a bright, shiny apple. When we're talking about really profoundly gifted students, they're often really hard to satiate in terms of their quest for knowledge. They are working so quickly, they are reading voraciously, and they just have so many questions that it's hard to answer all of them. They work at a quicker pace when compared to peers, and there's often some things that come out that can be challenging. For example, really intensely feeling things. So one metaphor that I'm borrowing from another presenter I've heard is that your gifted kid is like Bart, and your schoolhouse gifted kid is like Lisa Simpson. So some of you are nodding because you may have one of those kids at home who's a little like Bart. So I was fortunate enough to attend the NAGC conference this year, and I got to hear Jack Andraka speak. He is, if you don't know his story, it's a phenomenal story. He was in middle school and high school doing science experiments in his basement. He talked about a time that he knocked out the power of his entire neighborhood because of an experiment he did with a Tesla coil. And he also shared that his mother is probably on a terrorist watch list because of the science materials that he bought on her credit card. So very Bart Simpson-like. He's also, looking at patenting an invention he came up with when he was 16 to test for pancreatic cancer. So what does that look like in the classroom in terms of why students may need the REACH program? So your schoolhouse gifted kid is going to need maybe 6 to 8 times of learning something to really master it. And on the other hand, you might have a child who only needs 1 to 2 times, or they really know it, just to start off with. So when you have kids that are constantly asking why and wanting more information at a really different level than their peers, it can be challenging to provide for the teacher in the classroom to be the single-handed source to provide that knowledge and learning for our kids. So that's why we have the REACH program for students who really need that difference. One of the other patterns, hopefully you notice up here, is that there's a lot about creativity, that students who are gifted tend to be really out-of-the-box thinkers. And Dr. Ruddiman will get into a lot more of the different characteristics of your schoolhouse gifted versus this profoundly gifted difference that we see in students. But that is one of the things that you'll notice, and that is part of what I'll get to later about the REACH screening process. We do take into consideration students' creativity in the assessments that we do in the district. I notice some people are either taking notes or taking pictures. This will all be posted on the REACH website, both a video of the talk and the PowerPoint, so it'll all be there to reference or to share with your friends who couldn't make it tonight. So, again, my clicker's not working so well, sorry about that. Going back to the board policy, hopefully from that brief description, you can see the whole concept of requiring modification. So our teachers do a lot of things to enrich different learners in the classroom. I am in classrooms in every school in this district, and I see teachers that really take the extra time to find activities that are appropriate for students at their level in their zone of proximal development. And there are often different activities going on in the same classroom, and the students don't even know it. So there's a lot going on to meet your child's needs in the classroom. The REACH program is really about if we think they have exceptional needs that require that modification. So why REACH? There's the acronym for REACH. REACH, Explore Academic and Creative Heights. What it looks like at the district level, just to give you a brief overview, is that in grades 1 and 2, teachers push into students' classrooms and basically do a special with them. In grades 3 and 4, it's a pull-out program. And then in grades 5 to 8, it is replacement social studies. So the teachers do the social studies curriculum, but often have time for students to do some independent research or some projects that are more creative in nature to meet their needs there. Can I just see a quick show of hands? How many of you have, for your first time, a child in 2nd grade in Hillsborough? Can I just... Oh, okay, well that must mean that's the reason to come out tonight. So this is what you have in store for your child if they are selected for the program throughout their K-12 career. And as far as in the high school, because I don't think I have that up here, there are such a variety of classes and extracurricular activities that really we find all of our students are able to shine in their area that they're interested in. Without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dr. Ruddiman, and she's going to talk more about needs of gifted students and answer questions you have about that.
Okay. To click forward?
Yep. And back is it right?
Well, I'm delighted to be here. And I'm delighted that you're first-time 2nd grade parents, because I have been here for several years to help parents to understand the nature of giftedness and characteristics of gifted, we're going to start, I want you to think of a famous genius, okay? Somebody famous that we would all know, and someone who's extraordinary in some area. Okay, got somebody in mind? Okay, pop your hands up. Let's see who we got. Hawking, right? Einstein, with my sixth graders, Einstein was always one or two that came out. He is kind of our iconic genius, isn't he? With the crazy hair and everything. Another one. Say it again. Oh, Roger Federer, the tennis star. Excellent. Genius at tennis, okay. Want to go on that track, right? Saw a special the other night on Jack Nicklaus, who is a great golfer, okay, and what he can do. Someone else. Famous geniuses. Beethoven. Okay, so now we're into another domain, aren't we? Music. So we have athletics, that bodily kinesthetic. We have math, science, logical. Okay. Another. Newton, Isaac Newton, another physicist, kind of science logic person. Picasso, artist, visual spatial. Mahatma Gandhi, who in this whole idea, obviously verbal linguistic, right? Obviously wonderful skills with people and leadership ability, okay? There's another interesting domain, and we're talking here obviously is multiple intelligence theory. Have you ever heard of that, multiple intelligence theory, Howard Gardner, different ways of being smart? Well, he has 8 that he can identify with where the intelligence occurs in the brain. So there is part of the brain that houses musical intelligence, and there's a part of the brain that houses math, kind of logical intelligence. It's right there. And there's bodily kinesthetic, people that are athletic. He has one that he causes 8.5, which is the moral ethicist. And Gandhi would probably fall into that, right? People who have a highly developed sense of ethics, moral, right and wrong. Okay? The reason that Howard Gardner, does not identify the moral ethicist as a distinct intelligence is because he doesn't know precisely in the brain where it occurs. So his first 8, and actually this was a theory in 1983 when he came up with this. In the 1990s, with the advent of brain research and neuroscience and the fMRI, it's pretty settled science. There's parts of the brain that do different things. And we all have seen this for years. If you've ever had the distress of someone you love that had a stroke and they've lost the ability to speak, but they could still play the piano, or they could still, had other faculties that were still available to them. So part of their brain was damaged, but other parts of their brain were not. Okay, so what we're talking here is multiple intelligence theory. I always like to begin with this to set the tone that there's different ways of being smart. And up until Howard Gardner, the middle of the 20th century, smart was identified by an IQ test. You could actually have a number that would say you're smart and you're not. Now, I have a real respect for the IQ test, and I believe that it does give us something called general G, general intelligence, okay? And when it's at a high level, we find people can do pretty much everything well. Some things they do extraordinarily well, which rises to the level of genius, okay? The kind of people that we've been talking about. Most people, according to Howard Gardner, have 2 or 3 dominant intelligences. That doesn't mean gifted. It means that they are those things they do better than other things. And we all can identify with that. A quick story. A few years ago, I was doing this with a group of teachers, and one teacher was just not having any of it. And she said, I require my students to be good in everything. Okay. So a little later on, I was asking, have you ever tackled a project? And this woman popped up her hand, and she was very proud of the fact that she had renovated her bathroom. And she had spackled the walls, and she had done the painting and all the design work, and she even worked on some of the plumbing. And then she said, and I designed the tile work. And then I said to her, and then you laid the tile. Oh, she said, oh, no, I didn't do that. I can't do that. I hired that to be done. Really now? You weren't able to do the tile work by yourself? And she got it. Because our kids are good in one thing does not mean they're universally extraordinary in everything. So one of the things that I'd like you to walk away from tonight is this idea of labeling students as gifted or not gifted. Better off that we don't label. There's a woman named Carol Dweck. She does her work out of Stanford, and she has a book called Mindset, and something that you might want to pick up and read. Open mindset and closed mindset. An open mindset is that you're open to trying things. And this is really what we want our kids to be. We want them to have that willingness to engage in all manner of things, right? To try things out. Aren't you at the point with your second graders that do you want to try dance? Do you want to try Taekwondo? Do you want to try swimming? And that's the way we phrase it with them. Do you want to try something out to see if it's something you enjoy? If they enjoy it, seem to have an affinity for it, they continue moving on. I had a daughter who was really into dancing and did tap dancing and realized that she had no ability with tap dancing at all and was like, okay, Jillian, you can step away from tap dancing. I understand. The idea that you can be willing to engage with something and not be perfect at it allows you to really enter into the world, that open mindset. What Dweck says, and I think it's in chapter 3, she has a little section where she talks about the problems with gifted education, gifted programming, is when we label kids as gifted, we close down their mindset. So they either are afraid to take intellectual risks for being found out to be a poser, as I'm not as smart as everybody says I am, or the kid that doesn't want to take intellectual risk because there's no reason to because I'm smart. You know, they've told me I'm smart. I don't have to prove anything. Closed mindset. It's an unhealthy thing. So I come from a philosophy of not labeling students. So as we move forward, I'm putting that out there so you know what you're working with here. The definition of gifted, this definition, I'm going to see if I can do this so we can be on the same page. And my tech man told me I could do this. The definition of gifted, this is actually from the Marlin definition, 1972, and it's been adapted by the state of New Jersey, and it's the definition that's used here in Hillsborough. Gifted learners are children and youth with outstanding talent. Think outstanding, extraordinary, way beyond above average, okay? Who perform or who have the potential for performing at remarkably high levels of accomplishment when compared to others of their age, experience, or environment. So the idea of gifted has much to do with the community a child is in, okay? And what they do. What we're going to see tonight is based on Joe RENZULLI'S work. Joe is at the University of Connecticut. It's been up there for about 40 years. He is really the leading voice in gifted education. I have to tell you that when Joe started his work, he was vilified by the gifted and talented gurus and experts who were all about IQ tests, finding the very best and brightest, skimming them off, putting them in special programs, magnet schools, schools for gifted. I am not denigrating that. That is one model of doing gifted education, but it's really for the profoundly gifted children. We're talking 1 to maybe 2% of the total population. I don't think that's what you want here, okay? Because you either are that and you get all that wonderful stuff someplace else, or nothing at all. Joe figured that there's different ways of being smart. He was doing his work simultaneously with Howard Gardner's multiple intelligence theory, made perfect sense to him. And he feels that we shouldn't be talking about giftedness, but rather gifted behavior. And that this is his model, his three-ring model. Gifted behavior is when high ability, that we can find. We see it with ability in school, we see it in test grades, it's not difficult to find. But high ability coupled with creativity, what do they do? What kind of interesting questions do they ask? What kind of passions do they have? How, and then the third, how motivated are they? That task commitment piece. Gifted behavior is exhibited by people who are doing something because they are intrinsically motivated. It's a nice psychological term that means that it comes from within. I will tell you that your second graders will do anything to please you. Their number one motivating factor is to make you happy. Enjoy it. They're going to middle school someday, and you're not going to enjoy that luxury. When they do things to make you happy, that's an external motivation. When they do something to get a good grade, that's an external motivation. We look for kids with this gifted behavior that will go to extraordinary lengths, work really hard, put out lots of effort, and it doesn't count for anything. It's not for a grade. It's not for a reward. They're not going to get a prize, you know. And it's not necessarily because you approve, right? It's just because they need to do it, that internal motivation, task commitment. Joe also introduces us to the term schoolhouse gifted. This is the Lisa model. And if you have a child that fits this category, you are so blessed. These people are going to be successful all the way through. They love school, they love their teachers, they love to do their homework, they are bright and enthused, and school kind of comes easily to them. They know how to play the school game well. They're going to be just fine, right? I don't know whether they'll make the REACH program or not. It doesn't matter. They're going to be really good in school, and they're going to do really well. Schoolhouse gifted. But gifted kids show evidence, they may show evidence of schoolhouse gifted, but they go way beyond classroom expectations. They're intrinsically motivated. I used to ask my middle school kids that would come into my G&T program, I said, did you ever have a project where, like, let's say, for example, you had to write some poetry, and the assignment was, you know, to write 4 poems and illustrate them and turn them in. And you did the work, and on Sunday, you know, afternoon, the project was done, showed it to mom and dad, everybody said, oh, it's really good, really looks great, and then you continued to work on it all through the night. Why would you do that? You knew you already had the A. At noon on Sunday, you had an A on that project. Why would you continue to work on it? And some brave little soul in my class would say, because I just love doing it. Whether it's poetry or whether it's math puzzles or whether it's, you know, an artistic project, just because I love doing it. That's the intrinsic motivation piece. Gifted education needs to involve for these kids a rigorous pace. Cindy's mentioned that these are kids that get it the first time, second time it's taught. Sometimes these kids walk into the classroom already knowing what we're going to teach, okay? We have something in education called core, Common Core, right? It's kind of what everybody needs to know and be able to do at some benchmark, first grade, second grade, whatever. In education, we need to bring kids up to core that are not there, that are struggling learners or whatever, learning disabilities, and we work with them to make sure that they hit core. We have some students that walk into our classrooms that are already beyond the Common Core, just because of what they've read, because of their experiences, because of what they're interested in. And it's not generally in everything, but they may be particularly well-versed in something. I had a young man years ago, one of my first experiences with a profoundly gifted young man, and his thing was social studies. He just had read voluminously on particularly military history. And so anything in social studies classes through middle school was really boring. I mean, he kind of knew it. And the kind of things that were going on in the classroom that he had questions about were way beyond the curriculum. And so in 7th grade, he had a very perceptive teacher who walked him down to me and said, I can teach my class or I can teach Stephen. I can't do it at the same time. Can you take him? And Stephen came to me and did independent study social studies. And essentially, we did the textbook and then went way beyond. It was so much fun. When he got to the high school and we were advocating for him to have programming that would be appropriate for him, when we finally convinced administrators, this is many years ago, Stephen is now close to 30, they finally decided that, yes, it would be okay for him to have AP classes in his sophomore year, and he could have advanced classes in his freshman year. And they put him in advanced everything, including science. And he was like, dude, it's cool. I'm not really gifted in science. I can take whatever you want to give me. So he took like honor science, but he wasn't in the extraordinary sciences. He knew himself so well. He knew what his passions were and his interests were and what he did well. And he could work at a really rigorous pace in what he was interested in. So these kids, in some cases, need to go beyond the classroom in order to work at the pace that's appropriate for them. They also need choice. Often, these kids, and you might see this at home, even at this stage, don't do things because it's the right thing to do. Indeed, if it doesn't interest them, they don't do it. So often we have really bright kids that don't do well in school. Okay? How many of you thought Stephen Jobs is one of your famous geniuses? Thomas Edison, Robin Williams, true genius, yeah? Jane Goodall, anybody? They did not do well in school. They were, we all recognize, extraordinarily bright. But you know, if it wasn't relevant to them, if they really didn't want to care to learn it, they just didn't. So they didn't play the school game well. Not like Lisa, who will do anything she's told to do. She might roll her eyes about it, but she'll get it done. Bart will just blow it off. So there needs to be some element of choice. So if the whole class is doing everything exactly the same way, that's not necessarily healthy for these kids. Differentiation in the classroom, which Mrs. Sini mentioned, very important. And then, and this is really pretty fascinating, gifted people work purposefully. And that doesn't mean they're working for a grade. It means they're working for something that's meaningful for them, that they're doing something because it matters to them. Now, they'll figure out all the things they have to do for school, but when they're working and they're given an opportunity to work on something that's important to them, they need an authentic audience, they need an authentic purpose, and grades are not authentic. That's just not going to cut it for them. Gifted education needs to require research skills and critical thinking and analysis and problem-solving skills and communication skills, not just communicating a product outward to an audience, but also communication and collaboration working with each other. Okay? So in the REACH program, these are the kind of things that are being developed. Okay? The kids are working at a faster pace, they have some element of choice, and they're working for an authentic audience. And they're doing this in order to gain those level and higher level thinking skills that maybe are hitting them, and their need for them is a bit sooner than their chronological or age level peers. Okay, so what you're going to see now is a synthesis of lots and lots of research, and that's just my giving you the validation of where this comes from. You looked at this, characteristics of gifted children. There's a lot of positives that you can see. superior language, learning rapidly, keen observing, capacity for memory, superior reasoning, intense and highly motivated. But look at the negatives, because those kind of positive behaviors also can lead to some negative, like having uneven mental development. It's been described as the asynchronous concept. You think about a potter's wheel, and you put the clay on the potter's wheel, and you place the clay correctly, and when you spin, you're going to get a beautifully symmetrical pot. Is that correct? Those of you that know how to do pottery. If the clay is a little off kilter and you spin the wheel, you're going to have a lopsided pot. One side will be concave, one side will be convex. You can think about that in terms of a really, really bright person. Often they're extremely bright in some area and not as well developed in another. Do you watch The Big Bang Theory? Okay? Some of us watch it obsessively because it's our tribe. And you look at Sheldon, who is so brilliant and in so many ways so immature, so incapable of dealing with the real world. That's not uncommon for really bright people to have deficiencies in social skills or reading social cues, or to be incredibly bright with math but not being very good writers, or being incredibly bright language arts reading kids but not very good in math. Doesn't mean they're poor in math. It means that it's just not on the level that they are with their writing or their social studies. My friend Stephen, brilliant in social studies. Science, he was okay. He was an A student, but he wasn't extraordinary. He knew it. Negative characteristics, perfectionism, that they have to be right, that they obsess over things being right all the time. These are the kids that make a mistake and they erase it to the point of putting a hole in the paper. Have you seen that happen? That they go into meltdown because it's just not the perfect, it's not the way it's supposed to be. So it's something that in gifted education we are concerned about and help kids to work through. Okay? So this idea of gifted education is not just academic. It's about the social emotional needs that these kids have. So you imagine that you have kids that are in a gifted program or the REACH program, and they're having conversations about perfectionism, and a kid's in there saying, I don't know, that doesn't make any sense to me. I don't do that. Okay? I don't have any problems with that. You put a really good student, 5th grade student, in a class with the REACH 5th grade students, and there's a disconnect. So I'm trying to help you to understand that there are different types of programming to meet different types of need. And I'm hoping you heard what Cindy said, that your kid being identified as gifted and having opportunities that go beyond the classroom is not some kind of magic bullet that's going to get them into Princeton or Harvard someday. It doesn't work that way. What we're trying to do is provide learning opportunities and learning experiences that are appropriate for their needs. Okay? Opinionated, extreme feelings of being different. Not so much right now, but this is going to raise its head in 4th grade, 5th grade, and certainly by the time they're adolescents. Okay, so we're going to look at some elements of personality, and we'll start with cognition, which is the way the brain works and how they process information. This is set up as a word wall, okay? I did not do this. I came up with all the things, and I was putting them into like nice, organized lists. And a friend of mine, Sarah, who was at the time about 26, looked over my shoulder and she says, Joni, you could do this in a much more interesting way. How so, Sarah? She said, well, let's do it like a word wall. You know how like when you tweet things out? No, Sarah, I've never tweeted and I don't know what a word wall is. Because I'm old, I'll own it. She said, okay, So on a tweet or a word wall, things that are really large are generalizable. Things that are common, pretty common. And things that are writ small tend to be things that are less common. Might be true, but not true all the time. So with cognition, with gifted people, they generally, writ large, have unusual ideas, they're highly creative, they connect seemingly unrelated things, okay? They have this very fast way of thinking. They have abilities, superior abilities to reason or generalize and problem solve, which we call high intelligence. Sometimes we see rich imagination, and sometimes we see extensive vocabulary and the fascination with words. And I would argue that if we identify children too young, that's what we're identifying, precocious readers. And now by 4th grade, it all levels out. I love it when a kindergartner is identified as gifted, and by 4th grade, the school district contacts the parents and says, they're not gifted anymore. They were, but we fixed it. They're not. Sometimes have an extensive vocabulary. Sometimes they learn things rapidly. Sometimes, not all kinds of things, but usually the things that they love. Excellent long-term memory. Sometimes good in math, not always. Sometimes an avid reader, not always. Complex and deep thinker. Mind runs on multiple tracks at the same time, kind of a fast thinker. Okay? So there you have elements of cognition that we look for. We don't necessarily see all of them all the time in a bright child. What we look for are the kids in the middle. Original thinkers, curious, making quick connections, fast thinkers. What about the perception and emotion? Gifted people tend to be sensitive. These are the kids that you really don't want watching the news. They're the ones that are going to ask tough questions, that they worry about things in the world. Surprisingly, and notice that it's writ large, they have a great sense of humor. But if you watch Big Bang Theory, Sheldon cracks himself up. He has a sense of humor. Nobody else gets it, but he has a sense of humor, generally kind of quirky. Perceptive, observant, intense. There's a guru in gifted education named Jim Delisle out of Ohio, and he says that intense is the word to describe gifted people. They're intense in purpose, they're intense in their passions, they're intense in their life. Sensitive to small changes in environment. This can be the Dombrowski stuff, where they don't wear blue jeans, that they don't like shirts with tags on the back, that kind of thing. Tend to be introverted. Even the people that are extroverted need that time, that quiet time alone. You can have a child that is very gregarious in school, seems to have a lot of friends, but it'll be the same child that comes home and just wants to be in their room, just wants to read a book, just needs to be quiet by themselves for a time. We need to respect that. They're aware of things that others are not, tend to perceive the world differently. They tend to tolerate ambiguity and complexity better than others. These are the kids that see shades of gray sooner than their peers. Little children see things in black and white. Gifted kids will tend to see the ambiguity, as they can see many sides of an issue and can consider multiple viewpoints. Sometimes they have that sense of childlike wonder and are open to experiences. I would argue that if we do our job well, that will be writ large, as well as being emotionally stable and serene. Gifted people have a great capacity for serenity and self-awareness and self-confidence, and a lot depends on the environment in which we develop them and raise them. That's what you're doing at home, and that's what we want to do appropriately at school for them. Motivation and values. What motivates these people? Well, they are perfectionists. They set high standards for themselves and for others. I had a little guy 2 years ago, Leo, who profoundly gifted, little guy, 4th grade, and I knew him from 2nd grade, and I kind of had warned the upper elementary school that he was coming, And we didn't communicate effectively. So we said, Leo needs a strong teacher. Well, Leo is totally left brain anal. He's like a little mini scientist. And he's the kind of kid that tells time that it's 10:32.5. And he was in a classroom with a teacher who was very structured, very kind of particular. Miss A, it's time. We are 30 seconds past the time to change for math. I know, Leo. Thank you very much. He drove her crazy. She drove him crazy. They were too similar. We've learned when we're asking for placement of kids, these identified kids that we found that are really kind of quirky and really pretty profoundly bright, we've learned to ask for teachers who will give them space. Rather than a strong teacher, a teacher that, first of all, will like them and respect them, because not everybody likes gifted people, because they are intense, and they can be opinionated, and they can be really kind of a pain in the neck. So we want teachers that will like them and embrace them, but give them space to do things differently in the classroom, space to be their quirky selves, space to go out of the classroom and work with the GT specialist as needed. They're different, and that's okay, because a teacher generally like that will recognize the value of the differences of all the kids in her classroom or his classroom. That's the idea of differentiation. They really want to know, really highly curious. They're motivated by things that matter to them. This is the one. They're independent, autonomous. They're not motivated by rewards and praise. This one, parents, is the one that's going to drive you crazy. Because as they get older and they're like failing health, how can you fail health? It's like, easy. I don't know. I think it's kind of dumb, and I don't like the way she teaches it. It doesn't matter. Just do the homework. You're going to drive you crazy. Not motivated by getting an A or not. Not motivated by pleasing people or not. That autonomous, independent piece. Looking for truths and patterns and meaning in life. Enjoying challenges. Risk-taking. One of the things with middle school and high school kids that I work with that I really am concerned about, their brains are wired to take creative risks. If we don't build that into their school life or the world that they're in, they will seek other kinds of risks and do really stupid things, like shoplift or drive a forklift down the center of the main street or something really stupid. So that the idea of feeding their brain, their need for stimulation, and we want that to be intellectual stimulation. They get outraged by moral injustices. These are the kids that are like Gandhis, that are aware of society and making the world a better place. Sometimes so involved, it's almost like ADHD in the brain. Their brain is just going on so many different channels at once. It's hard for them to focus. Strong moral convictions, being honest, and having a high drive are all part of this. Sometimes being visionaries, having a sense of destiny and purpose, that goes along with the moral outrage and the sense of being a moral philosopher. Loves ideas, discussion, being sincere, rich, small, depends, as the older they get. And they accept others and themselves. And again, if we do our job well, that gets written larger. They become much easier to deal with. And then ultimately, activity. These are people with a great deal of energy. Can be physical and mental energy. These are the kids you put to bed appropriately at 9 o'clock. All the lights are off. The cell phones, the computers are out of their room. It's, soothing background noises. Music's playing. And they should go to sleep. And you go in at 11 o'clock, and their eyes are wide open. What are you doing? I'm just thinking, high energy, high intellectual energy. This surprises teachers in school, but it doesn't surprise you parents. These are the kids that on the weekend will get involved in something, and you'll call them for lunch at like 11:30. I'll be right down, I'm just kind of finishing something. and you'll call them at 12. You call them at 1. Finally, at 2 o'clock, they'll kind of, be ready to come down for lunch. I was just finishing something up, having that intense passion and concentration for sustained work. Teachers are astounded by that. But I would turn to say to teachers, that's because of the way we do school. Something just gets interesting for these kids. Oh, time for recess, time to go to music, time for something else. The chapter just gets interesting. Oh, chapter's over, on to something else. But it's just getting good. And these are kids that will explore it on their own, but they can't explore it in school. So if they seem to do school in a very surface way, I would argue that in part that's because that's the way we do school. It's about covering content. And that's what people like Cindy and I rail against in education. But we keep layering, we being educators writ large, this would be departments of education, keep layering in more and more stuff that we have to teach in school. I have a very good friend who teaches middle school health. Gets the new thing that as a health teacher she's required now to make kids aware of and to address in health class. This is where they teach about drugs and alcohol and wellness and sexuality and all the stuff that's going to keep kids alive. Gambling. Gambling's an issue. We've got to help kids to prevent gambling, have the health teacher teach it in a 6-week cycle where she has the kids for maybe 30 hours. We just keep layering on more and more stuff to teach. Okay? Our really bright kids that have passions for information, they'll do it at home with you. And it's real important for when you see that happening, you let the school know that it's happening, because we may not see that in school because of the nature of school. Working themselves to exhaustion, working, all into the night. They need periods of contemplation and quiet. These are the kids that will be really, really good in school. They're social, they have friends, and they come home and they just want to go to their room and shut the door and be quiet for a while. You see it, again, not something we necessarily see in school, particularly if they have strong interpersonal skills and they're good with people. They know how to play the people game. It is inappropriate at lunch to sit by yourself and read a book. You're supposed to play nicely with everybody in the sandbox. You're supposed to go out for recess. You're supposed to, be involved. And they'll do that, and generally pretty happily. But you'll see it when they come home. They need that contemplation time. They can be very spontaneous. And then in social relations, these are the kids that ask tough questions, and they question authority. I tell the story of my daughter-in-law, Kate, married to my son, Jake. Kate is one of the smartest women I know. She's a Princeton grad. She's now a doctor. She's a geriatrician. Is that wonderful in my life? I love this. So Kate got kicked out of CCD when she was 6 years old. CCD is the required, in Catholic Roman Catholic school, teaching kids about the Catholic Church, right? Kate got kicked out at 6. Parents were called in, and her parents were told, you have to remove Kate from CCD because she asks inappropriate questions, like why? So here's little Kate at 6 being taught very intense theological stuff, and she's like, that just doesn't make sense. I'm not sure that is physically possible. If you're Catholic, you know what I'm talking about. If Kate had had a really sharp priest or nun or theologian at 6, she would have been fine, because those questions can be addressed appropriately. But some poor little lay teacher in Georgia, back in the day, couldn't handle it. They ask embarrassing questions, they ask too many questions, they ask non-conforming questions, and this can be a problem in school. I once asked some really bright kids why they sat in the back of the room. I went in and I had a whole group of kids that were really sharp, and they were in the back of their science room. And I said, were you sitting in the back of the science room? Because bright kids tend to sit up front so they can engage with everything. And they said, no, we're just back there because we talk among ourselves. And In social studies class that year, a lot of Asian Indian kids, they had rewritten the textbook when the social studies book got to India because there were so many mistakes in it. I said, you tell your social studies teacher that? Oh, no. It's like literally, why bother, right? But they entertain themselves, okay? Asking inappropriate questions. So one student said to me, I always sit in the back of the room because then I can kind of see, when the hands go up and who else has responded, and then I know when it's appropriate to raise my hand. He said, because I could engage the teacher all the time, but I learned that that wasn't appropriate. So I kind of count 2, 3, 4. Okay, it's all right for me to raise my hand again. I said, geez, when did you figure that out? He said, kindergarten. Broke my heart. School can be a tough place for these kids. We need to try to figure out ways to make this school a more comfortable place. They do tend to feel out of step with others. This really starts to hit in about 4th and 5th grade, okay? Your little guys are still so protected by you. Their lives are really kind of micromanaged by adults. We tend to run interference, even with their friends or coaches or whatever. But by 4th and 5th grade, these pre-adolescents, they really start to feel this difference between who they are and others around them. Kids that they've been friends with since preschool, they realize he's just not very interesting. He's just not, they'll listen to the State of the Union address and want to talk about it on the bus. And the kids are like, what? What are you talking about? And they learn real early to just kind of be quiet. But they need some place where they can engage with others that are like them. They tend to be very compassionate, more compassionate than people are to them. They tend to be empathetic. They feel what others feel and try to understand them. So we've seen some really interesting characteristics of gifted from their activity level, their cognition, their social emotional needs. And it's interesting when you look at this list that in typical gifted and talented programs where kids are identified and labeled as gifted, these are characteristics that will screen them out of a program. Asking inappropriate questions, being too intense, not playing nicely with others, making jokes or puns at inappropriate times. That's one of my favorites. The very things that we know can be true of highly gifted people are the very things that will screen them out of many gifted and talented programs. Why? Because many gifted and talented programs, and I'm not talking Hillsborough, but I'm talking of the majority of gifted programs in the state of New Jersey and around the country that I have been involved in, and I have known people that are involved in. The majority are identifying good school behavior. They're identifying the Lisas. That's not necessarily inappropriate, but they're missing the kids that need them the most, the ones that are not necessarily appropriate school kids. It's important for us to recognize that what we are attempting to develop are called the competencies. This really is gifted and talented education. It's not so much about the academics, but it's really about the life skills. These skills, Partnership for 21st Century Skills, don't come to us from Department of Education or the state of New Jersey or even Hillsborough. They come to us from the real world. They come to us from your world, business, industry. And you can recognize that this is what is valued in the workplace. Less than 10 years ago, two people, Ken Lay and Denny Golden, two entrepreneurs, were at business people, were at a conference, and they started chatting over coffee on the break about the biggest problem that they had in business were hiring really competent workers. And they weren't talking about worker bees. They were talking about kids coming out of some of the best universities and colleges in the country. And they said, these kids show up, they're very polite, they're appropriately dressed, and they wait very politely to be told what to do. And then they ask, how do you want me to do it? They go off and do what they're told to do the way they're told to do it. They come back and they wait for their praise. And it's like, as Ken Lay put it, dude, I'm paying you. Just do your job. Well, what Denny Golden and Ken Lay and a ream of others from the world of business, industry, nonprofits, including ETS, Crayola Crayon, all the computer, Cisco, all the computer people, all of this partnership for the 21st century realized is that education was not preparing kids for the real world. Why would they ask, what am I supposed to do? Why would they ask, how am I supposed to do it? Because that's the way teachers deal with them in school, right? So if you're seeing a shift in education, it's a good shift, and then just transfer those skills that you see being developed with your children in school to your real world, and you'll realize, oh my gosh, that's what they really need to do. I had an educator a few years ago, a gifted and talented educator, George Betts. He's out of Denver. And he said, these 21st century competencies have been gifted education forever. This is what we want kids to do. It's not about the content or what they're learning or the academic. It's what they do with it. What are they able to produce and create? So here's your goals of your Hillsborough REACH program. These are the goals that are written on your website. And look at the parallels to what we're trying to do with competencies and developing gifted people. It's all there. Developing abstract and complex thinking, developing problem solving and decision-making capacity, developing awareness and acceptance of oneself as a unique individual and as a member of society. That's the social emotional piece. And to increase independence and individuality and self-direction, the self-directed learner. That's what the REACH program is about. For some kids, it's really important and necessary. It's not necessary and important for all kids. Some of them, emotionally or cognitively, are not ready for it, and they'll find it when they get to the high school and they take their AP courses and they take their honors courses. Some of them do really well in school. They're like the Lisas of the world, and they don't need something that's different or beyond school because they do school really well, and they love it. Hillsborough REACH program meets the special needs and interests and abilities of identified students, and this is the way, and I won't go through this because it is on your website, and you probably are aware of this, but it's all about meeting needs appropriately. If a kid needs support in math, we make sure they get that support in math. Should all kids get the same kind of support in math? No, not if they don't need it. You as parents would be appalled if we did that. Well, you know, we're all going to stop fractions because we have 3 kids in the class that don't understand fractions, so we're going to go back and teach fractions to every single kid in the class. Excuse me. There are kids in the class that already know fractions. I'm sorry, but it wouldn't be fair if we didn't teach everybody the same thing. No. We have kids in the class that already know fractions. They come in knowing fractions. Is it fair for them to sit there and do fractions all over again? No. They're going to do something that's different. Fair, this idea that everybody gets the same thing at the same time, is an insanity. Just is that we work with what's appropriate for kids, and we find what their needs are. All right, so now we're going to get to this idea of CogAT testing. All right, so CogAT is a test of cognitive ability. It's not about what they know, it's what they are able to do. It's just where it's a baseline test. It's just what they're doing right now. How they think abstractly, how they problem solve, how they read with inference and have comprehension skills. It's the first test that they take. It's the first standardized test they take. So to that end, the second grade teachers prepare them with test-taking skills. How you go about, it's called test genre. how you read a test, how you answer questions, and they practice literally how to do the test, okay? What's on the test is not anything that they can prepare for. There's not anything that you can do to get them ready for the test. It's just who they are and what they are and where they are right now. It gives us a baseline number of what their needs and abilities are to better serve them with what they need. Verbal skills would be reading and writing and comprehension, that type of thing, word awareness. Quantitative is the idea of math skills. And the nonverbal or spatial would be like logic ability. Yep. So let me partner here with Cindy, who will discuss this with you a little bit more. But the point that I wanted to make with you is don't be afraid of the test. Don't make your kids afraid of the test. Just do it. You know, it's something new, it's something different, new experience, and we'll get some kind of information from it. It's not all the information, but it's some information that will help us serve our kids better.
So after listening to Dr. Ruddiman, you may be thinking, is my kid gifted? And I see maybe some people are thinking that. So what I would say is, regardless of identification for the REACH program, hopefully tonight you learned some of the characteristics that kids vary on. And my suggestion there is to help your child realize that variance and appreciate their own, where they are on that spectrum. So hopefully this will help you build self-awareness in your child. I would also say, you may be wondering, if my kid is gifted, should I tell them? And again, you'll make your personal decision, but if you look at the research in education, like Dr. Ruddiman mentioned Carol Dweck, the psychological research behind mindsets is attribution theory, and when you fail, what do you tell yourself? Is it because you weren't good enough? Well, then you can't get any better. So, you know, as part of this grander thought process that I'm sure you're going through, I encourage you with your child to just tell them to work as hard as they can and follow their interests, and everything else will work itself out. So here's the part of the evening where I'll share a little bit about the identification process for the REACH program in Hillsborough. So like Dr. Ruddiman said, the CogAT is one of the multiple measures that we use, and it gives us a starting point to see if we'll do further screening on a particular child because we think that we may need to make modifications to their program. So like Dr. Ruddiman said, there is no way to study for it. I will tell you that I will get parents who call me and say, well, my child already took the CogAT at home. Just so you all know and no one gets tricked on Amazon, the things that they sell on Amazon that say CogAT are not actually the CogAT. You can only buy the CogAT if you're an educator. So just tell them that they're going to take a test, and the test is going to help teachers understand how to teach them better. That's the best thing you can do, to just maintain their routine, not put undue stress on them, and just tell them that we're trying to learn about how we can help them learn. So as you hopefully know, this will be happening next week at most schools, Monday through Thursday. And you'll get a letter from me, hopefully before April, but I put April up there just to be safe, saying, here's your child's CogAT score, here's what we can learn about the CogAT score. There's a lot of information on the REACH website about the process and about the scores. So when you do get the scores back, I do encourage you to use those resources so that you can understand the score report. Check in with your child's teacher if you have any concerns. Every year, both myself and the REACH teachers get parents who call who are very concerned that there's a discrepancy in one area or the other. The best source of information, if you have a question about whether your child's doing okay, is their classroom teacher who interacts with them every day. So our goal, again, is to determine whether a child needs modification to their program, and we do that through starting with the CogAT and then a variety of other tests, an achievement test, a creativity assessment. We ask parents for feedback and teachers as well. So there are multiple measures. It's not one test and you're in or you're out. We really do try to look for teacher input. So if your child doesn't qualify in second grade for the program, like Dr. Ruddiman said, maybe they're just not ready. And in future years, teachers can nominate children for further screening in the program. We have a number of REACH teachers who have kindly donated their time tonight to come. Ms. Dano from HES was here, Ms. Lieberman from Woods Road was here, and Ms. Leonard from Amsterdam was here. You can find the email addresses for all of the REACH teachers on the district website. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to me. I'm happy to answer questions this evening, and we have a microphone over on the side. Dr. Ruddiman's happy to answer questions, and we just want to make sure that you have all the information you feel like you need to understand the REACH program in Hillsborough and gifted children in general. So I thank you very much for your time this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you have.
I had a question for you about how can you help us decide, it's going to sound strange, but whether REACH is right for our child. Because in listening to this and seeing this, you're the supervisor of social studies in REACH, and looking at my child and just understanding what he is and just hearing a little bit about what it was, and not necessarily for you, but for other people as well. You know, they're taken out of social studies, they're doing projects. My son is very strong in math and logic, but really shows no interest, has good reading skills, shows very little interest in actually wanting to write, liking to write. So I look at this and go, okay, it's project-based, they're pulling out of social studies, those aren't his interest areas. Right. And we talked about, you've talked about this now, some of his interest areas. So how can I help decide, let's just, for the sake of argument, say, we get all the way through and we say, yeah, you know what, we'd like to put him in REACH. But I look at it and go, it's not where his strengths are, where they seem to are. Of course, he's second grade, so maybe it is or it isn't his strength. I mean, it's hard to tell. But how can we understand whether REACH is right for him, or whether, for, let's just say for my son's example, just math, higher level math is needed than what a normal second grader has. Maybe he's at a 4th grade level or 5th grade level. And that's just all that's needed for him to keep him interested in school and keep him accelerated. Is that fall within REACH still, or is that, or what you're trying to accomplish, maybe not REACH with the pull out, but in a differentiated program? How can we decide what is the best way to go about keeping my son interested and excited and still learning at an appropriate pace when he's bored out of his mind in the mathematics they have to do now?
That's a great question. Did everybody hear back there what the question was? Thank you for projecting so well. So one thing, there is a shift in our program, and that's actually a function of some very historical things in the district that starting in 5th grade, REACH does happen in the social studies classroom, and that is not necessarily the best fit for every child. So I would say that, if your child does qualify for REACH, that starting with the classroom teacher to talk about, do you think this is the best choice for my child, would be a good place. And we do take classroom teacher input into account in the screening process. So if your child did qualify, we would have evidence that the classroom teacher and the achievement test, or I shouldn't say achievement, well, it is an achievement test. The achievement test that we do, aptitude, well, the second round of screening is more an achievement test. So we would have some evidence that pulling out of class would be okay and that the teacher thought that was a good thing to do. Now, what about in the secondary, 5 to 8 level? Would that be the best choice? Again, the teacher would be a great place to start. So that was one part of your question. How do we decide if this is right for my child? I'm happy to provide guidance after I learn more about your child. But again, I'm going to be learning from the classroom teacher. I can also go in and observe children. I'm happy to help any way I can. But again, we'll rely on that person that's with them every day academically. Your second question is more about, well, what if they're bored in math? And what if math is really their strong suit? It doesn't seem like this program is specifically tailored to that. One of the things that's important to know is we have a lot of support in place for students at various levels in both mathematics and literacy. The schools have specialists in both of those areas, and so if a classroom teacher notices, well, we're doing fractions, but I have a kid who already knows fractions, If they don't have anything in their repertoire ready to go, they consult with the math specialist who can give them activities for that child, who sometimes will pull that child out of class for a couple of lessons or once a week, depending on the child's needs. So we have a variety of structures in place for that already, but sometimes it takes a parent saying, you know, I think my child is already achieving the goals of this unit. Can you tell me a little bit about what they're doing in class? To find out a little more info and to press the matter, just so that we're aware, because when you have 25 little bodies in front of you, Johnny may be doing a great job, but you may not realize that he could have done this in his sleep. So that's helpful information for our partnership for you to share with the classroom teacher. And if you think they need more support, you know, certainly ask any one of us who's here to help. Any other questions? So the REACH program officially goes until 8th grade, but then there is a high school internship that guidance counselors let students know about and students can apply for at the high school. That's a community service internship. So it hits on the things that Dr. Ruddiman talked about, the care about the world and justice for students who want that outlet in high school. That is an option in addition to the AP classes and all of the extracurricular activities that we offer here.
Can you give us an idea about the number of children enrolled in this program right now?
So the percentage ranges by the grade, because it's sometimes parents will call me, you know, especially when we get to honors placements and say, well, you know, isn't there enough room for my child? And whenever we make decisions, it's not about having room. We'll make the room if we think the child has the need. So the percentage of students ranges from what's recommended by the National Association of Gifted Children, which is about 6 or 7% of the population, up into the teens in terms of percentages of students. So every grade has about 550 students, and somewhere between 7 and 15 or 20% of those will be identified for the program, depending on the year and the group of students. But it's not that there's a certain cutoff point of students who are allowed into the program. It's all based on need.
What's the structure of the REACH program? Does it go into the honors?
I'm so glad you asked that, and I want to make that very clear. I do honors placements for our students in 8th grade, and it does not get taken into consideration at all. So it's not a pathway into honors. It's not a requirement to get into honors. Every year there are some students who are in the REACH program who do not qualify for honors social studies as a freshman in the high school, and every year there are students who are in regular on-level social studies, and they do qualify for honors classes in the high school. I know that at Otten Road School right now there is advanced, starting in 6th grade. The mathematics and literacy supervisors do not look at who is in the REACH program. They do not ask me who is in the REACH program. It's based on, again, multiple measures, but having to do with how the students are performing in class and the data that we gather about them, nothing to do with REACH. We currently do not. We're always reviewing our program and thinking about ways to improve. That has been a suggestion that has come up over time. I do think that it's a little challenging with the label of gifted. You don't want to de-gift a child. That's not really something that we would do. So we don't test children to continue. There are times where, for a variety of reasons, parents may feel like the program is not the best fit for the child anymore. And the only time we have students exit the program is in that type of a case where either the child or the parent is expressing concern over participation. But at this point, children can be screened for the program in other years, but we don't screen them to take them out of the program. In 2nd grade, we screen all of the children. And then in higher grades, it depends on a teacher nomination. Not everyone was as loud as you. I do apologize for that. So the question was, are students screened again in other years and for the purpose of basically removing them from the program if they're not showing need for it at that point? And the answer to that question currently is no. Students are screened all through the second grade, and everyone takes a CogAT. And then in future years, if teachers notice a need, we will do screening on a child who's recommended for screening. One of the important things to know is that our teachers have received professional development, in many cases from Dr. Ruddiman, sometimes from myself. I meet with every new teacher who comes into the district to do a very similar presentation to Dr. Ruddiman's with them so that they feel able and qualified to alert our attention to students who may have needs that aren't currently being met.
I'm still not quite sure what the process is, so I understand that there's the COGAT screening. You assess scores for all the children. When would phase 2 and perhaps 3 continue? During what time frame? And when you do those other phases, are the children taken out for long periods of time during the regular school day? How does that all go?
So the question was about the second phase of screening. If from the COGAT or from a teacher recommendation, we believe that a child may require modification to their program, what happens then? We send you a letter so you are informed, and we ask for your permission to screen the child. So the only test we give to all children as a blanket is the COGAT, so we don't ask for permission from every parent because we use that data for such a variety of purposes in the district, not only for REACH. So after the COGAT, you would get a letter that says your child has been selected for further screening, and there's an achievement test that we give the child. Not a long process. It should be one chunk of time that they're taken out of class. And then there's also a creativity assessment. That one only takes 30 minutes. So we really do try to minimize time out of class and the length of the screening process. So the question was about whether students, once they're into the program, ever would be screened out, and the answer is no. Once a child qualifies for the program, at this point, they currently stay in the program through 8th grade unless there's a parent or student request to exit the program. At the elementary level, there is a balance of different subjects focused on creativity. For example, there's a creative counting unit. There's also a unit on symbolism and art. There's a whole variety. At the 5 to 8 level, it's more focused on social studies because the teachers have to instruct on the New Jersey core content standards in social studies while also doing REACH. A really nice example of a balance is in 5th grade, Ms. Seller does only REACH for social studies. So the students will be working on social studies most of the week, but then they might build a bridge, or they might have a project where they're doing something artistic. So she really tries to bring in the students' interests and give students a variety of educational experiences. That gets progressively more challenging as there become more and more social studies content standards for the teachers, and that is something that we're looking at as a district to make sure that we're providing the best program that meets all of our students' needs. There used to be specialist gifted and talented teachers at the Auten Road and middle school level, and I believe that those were cut in 2008. So we're doing the best that we can with the structure that we have now. So second grade, everyone takes a COGAT, and that's how you would go on to further screening. In 3rd grade and up, the process starts with the teacher recommendation because we don't screen all the students every year.
So when does the process start, like for the hybrid? Because we're new to the district, my son is in 5th grade, so he never did the COGAT in 2nd grade. And he does good at school, and do you mean that he could probably be in the REACH program? So how
That would be a good conversation to have with his teacher. So during the spring is when I ask teachers for nominations for students. With the exception of third grade, because the program is starting in third grade, if a child is new to district in third grade, we do give them a CogAT test because we want that data that we have on all the students in the district. But for fifth grade, I would suggest talking to your child's teacher and asking if he or she is considering nominating your child in the spring. So the requirement is that they take, so the question was about requirements for the second level of screening. There's an achievement test that they take and also a creativity assessment. So that's looking, the achievement test looks at reading, writing, and math ability, or achievement, I should say. And part of why we give that is because students are being pulled out of their classes. We want to make sure that there's not a significant concern in any area. And the creativity assessment asks them to think outside the box and show that they can come up with a lot of different ideas.
I guess let me rephrase my question. If they achieve a certain score of COGAT, is that warranted for further testing?
Yes.
So, okay. Can you clarify what the range is for further testing?
So we're looking at students who are above the 90th percentile for further testing.
What's the 70 is your rate, or what's the
90th.
90?
So the question was, you know, how does the CogAT play into who we select for further screening? And students who are at the 90th percentile or above are screened further.
Say suppose they are above 90% and they somehow create one achievement test. Would they be opted out of the Is it a consolidated?
Yes, we take all of the data points into consideration and use those multiple measures. So
So they have a threshold in each of those, like the way in GT and CogAT is 90. Similarly, do they have some threshold for achievement tests as well?
no, it's basically looking across those assessments to get a picture of the whole child. Again, including your input and the teacher's input as well.
All the kids are taking it together in the one classroom with their teacher. Is the testing done in the morning or the afternoon?
I believe that it's usually done in the morning. There may be some extenuating circumstance like a music rehearsal or something that would push it to the afternoon, but generally it's done in the morning. And if your child does have any special needs or modifications, there may be a small group of children that are tested due to their individualized education plan.
What if there's a child that's an IEP or a 504?
They get modifications. It depends on their IEP. So for those of you, individualized education plans are created for students who have special needs. There may be modifications on tests, and if your child does have an IEP, they would receive the appropriate modifications given their IEP. Mm-hmm. Exactly. Yes.
Question for both of you. How do we rank Hillsborough Township versus you're in a different township? So within New Jersey, how do we rank? Or how does this program compare to?
Right. Hillsborough is ranked pretty high in the state of New Jersey. Right. Hillsborough is ranked pretty high in the state of New Jersey. And as far as what's going on with the gifted program here, I'm impressed because there's just a very open mind and a constant exploration. The amount of professional development that was done across the board with teachers, you had what, 16 teachers or something that went through the Rutgers certificate program for G&T. These are teachers that were just curious and wanted to know more. And they're in the classrooms. And so they are, now well-versed in what they're looking for and how to recommend kids and how to serve kids' needs. Yeah, there's been a lot of work in the last 5 years in Hillsborough in this field, as well as looking at curriculum across the board. And I think that if you look at the state rankings, Hillsborough ranks pretty high.
I may be a biased source to answer this question about where Hillsborough ranks, but I did just have my aunt, who's a real estate agent, call me and say, I looked at the rankings and I don't know exactly what number Hillsborough came in, but it was somewhere towards the top, maybe top 25 in the state. And she said, I was so proud that you worked there. So that's my story this week about Hillsborough's rankings. But I will tell you from a gifted and talented perspective that I do get calls from other districts asking me, can we know about your program? Can we know about your identification? Can we know about the professional development that you ran in district? Because I would conjecture that we probably have the most teachers in one district who have gone through a gifted certificate program, because we did offer the program in district. There may be other districts that are following our lead now, because I have had some districts call and ask about running that program in their district, but I think it really speaks highly of Hillsborough to have that commitment to offer that professional development here.
The teachers that went through that program, and it was a 2 year, it's very rigorous, it's a graduate level program, chose to do this. It was something that the Hillsborough Board of Education made available to all teachers, said we will pay your tuition, and actually the Rutgers program came here. Hillsborough became a satellite campus for that certificate program. If they had enough interest, and they had more than enough interest, and those teachers went all the way through the program. It was really extraordinary. So yeah, that really has an impact in the classroom with differentiation, with attitudes in the school, and the attitudes with working with all kids, recognizing the needs of different kinds of learners. It's extraordinary. That is extraordinary.
If you have other questions, please feel free to let me know. I'm happy to answer them either this evening or at your convenience. Before you leave for this evening, if we could give a round of applause to Ms. Lynn Wolf. She was instrumental in putting this together tonight. And again, I appreciate your time and support of the district. So thank you very much.